If you're new to crossbow hunting, this is an episode of Death by Bunjie you're not going to want to miss. Some common beginner crossbow questions. That's this episode of Death by Bunjie. Again. One of the reasons I started this YouTube channel, one of the reasons that I'm doing Death by Bunjie and trying to put out these videos and stuff is to encourage people to enjoy the outdoors, encourage people to enjoy the outdoors using the crossbow as one of the tools to help you do that. And in order to really enjoy the crossbow and get the most use out of your crossbow, what you're going to have to do is understand some basic things. Over the last several years, I've come across a lot of common questions, and I've kept a little bit of a running tally of those questions so I can do a little bit of a video on it. Hopefully some of these questions will help you, if you're new to crossbow hunting, make that adjustment to be successful this fall if you are heading into the woods with your crossbow. Even if you've got some experience with a crossbow, you might find some of this information useful. Hopefully it will be good for you to watch, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So, without further ado, these are some common questions that people have when they start hunting with a crossbow. When do you cock your crossbow? For me, it depends on where I'm hunting. If I'm going down to the well pad food plot here, I just get my crossbow, got out of the shower, took my scent-free shower, got all ready, and I'm heading down to the well pad food plot. I just take the crossbow down with me. I might cock the crossbow and even put an arrow in it when I'm walking the last 100 yards or so, in case I kick out a deer and maybe I could get a clean shot at a deer that stood up, was looking at me, but was close, was stationary, that sort of thing. In theory, that could happen. You absolutely will not go into your blind or get into your tree stand with an arrow in it, however. You'll take that back out, put the arrow in the quiver. You can have it cocked while you're doing all that sort of thing as long as you got the safety on. But make sure that you are safe with that, and you're not going to have an arrow in it when you're doing that. If I've got an arrow in it and I'm walking, I'm carrying it out in front of me. I'm carrying it so the arrow is just like a loaded gun, pointing away from me, keep my finger off the trigger, keep the safety on, all that sort of thing. And rarely do I do that. I don't think that that's necessarily advisable. I don't think that's necessarily what you want to do. On the other hand, it is totally okay to carry that crossbow down into the woods and leave it uncocked until you get to your tree stand, until you get to your blind. You can easily cock a crossbow in a blind. It's not too hard to do. You can cock the crossbow in the tree stand, but that's a little more difficult. What I recommend you do is cock the crossbow before you get in your tree stand, put the safety on, no arrow. You're going to tie your rope around the stirrup, and then you're going to hoist that crossbow up into the tree stand once you've gotten into the tree stand and once you have all your stuff situated and you're all set up and you're comfortable. That's the last thing that I pull up the crossbow. But it's cocked at that time. You got to be very careful with those strings under tension, that you're not bumping the string on the edge of the stand or on a branch or anything like that. Make sure you got a nice clear avenue to pull that crossbow up into your tree stand, and you should be just fine. Is it okay to leave your crossbow cocked all day long? Or another version of that question is, how long do you leave your crossbow cocked? I have sat for 13, 14 hours in a tree stand without getting out of the tree stand and had the crossbow cocked the entire time. This crossbow shoots completely accurate afterward, so it's not a problem. These things are made out of tremendous materials. I really don't know where they came up with this material that can withstand any temperature range from 5 below zero all the way up to 100 degrees, and it still performs exactly the same way. It's an amazing type of material. But that's something that Excalibur and the crossbow manufacturers have figured out. I don't understand it, but I'm happy that they understand it. So you can leave it cocked all day long. Do not leave it cocked overnight. There's no reason to do that. Shoot the thing or uncock it at the end of the day, and don't leave it cocked overnight. Don't leave it cocked all season. You got to uncock this thing or shoot it at the end of the day. But you can leave it cocked all day long. I sit in the blind with it cocked, where it's got lots of room. I'm not going to be bumping the strings or anything like that. Very important. But have it sitting right in front of me and leaning up against my lap, whatever, ready to go all day long. Which leads me to the follow-up question, is it okay to uncock the crossbow? In my case, yes, it is 100% fine. It is okay to uncock an Excalibur recurve crossbow such as Bunjie here. I have no problem doing it. I have done it hundreds of times. Now, of course, my favorite hunts are the ones where I don't have to uncock the crossbow because I've taken a shot. If you're not in a situation where that is the case, more often than not, when I get out of the blind, I simply uncock the crossbow. What I do, to do that, I simply put the cocking rope back on the crossbow, take the safety off, hold on to it tight, fire the crossbow, and gently let the limbs relax and go back to the uncocked position. With a compound crossbow, if you have the pulleys and all the strings, you can't do that. You're going to have to fire it. There's a couple of ways to do that, to unload that crossbow. One, you can get one of the phony arrows that you shoot into the ground. You would do that from your tree stand. And basically that arrow has a big heavy head on the front of it so that it sticks in the ground and it kind of just stops. It doesn't penetrate real deep or anything like that. You can use that arrow over and over. Make sure you get one that is recommended by your manufacturer. You don't want to use one of those arrows. If it is not the right weight for your crossbow and it's an inappropriate arrow, then don't use it. Make sure you get the proper uncocking arrow if you're going to go that route. The other option is just to carry a small target with you, maybe. Fire one of your regular arrows, a field point or something, into that small target. Can I cock the crossbow in a tree stand? The answer to that is yes. What you're going to do is essentially, you can put your foot out in front of you, put the stirrup on it, and just cock it that way. You would have to, if you have a shooting rail, you kind of have to get that shooting rail out of the way in order to do that. I like to have a shooting rail in a tree stand because I can rest the crossbow on it. So you'd have to get that shooting rail out of the way, and you kind of got to be in good shape. I'm not in the best physical shape, so I'm a big guy, and for a big fat guy to pull back on that in a tree stand in a little enclosed area, that's not the best situation for me. If I want to take an additional shot in a tree stand, I have stood up in a tree stand and cocked a crossbow as well. That works for me. And if that doesn't work and I don't feel comfortable, don't feel safe doing that, I simply climb down, recock the crossbow, retether it with a rope, bring it back up, and do it that way. Where do you shoot a deer? In the woods. I'm going to do a video down the road here in the next month or so, hopefully, showing you my thoughts on where you shoot a deer, where you should aim on a deer. That's a very important subject. Every year I have to relearn that, and I think that everybody has their own special spot that they're aiming at when they go into the woods with their crossbow or with any type of hunting equipment. So I will be talking about that more down the road. Understanding anatomy is a very big part of hunting with a crossbow. You need to understand what you're aiming at, and I will talk about that in a future video, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. Can I put a rifle scope on my crossbow? My answer to that question is, why would you want to? I don't understand that question. I get that question quite a bit. People are like, well, can I use a rifle scope on it? I suppose you could, but there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, the reticles. This is a crossbow scope made by a crossbow manufacturer, designed by them to work on their crossbows. Why would you want to use something else? I don't understand that. The crossbow manufacturers do everything they can in their research and development to make sure that your use of this product is a very happy experience. They want this to be as successful an implement as you could possibly have. And if you stick to what the manufacturer recommends, you're going to have good success. They want you to be successful because they want you to be happy with the product so that you'll tell other people how great it is and they'll buy more of that product. If they were just haphazardly throwing parts together, they'd go out of business pretty quick. So I don't understand why you would want to deviate from what they have put together and designed and said is the most appropriate scope or the most appropriate part or tool or arrow or whatever for your crossbow. I stick to what the manufacturer recommends, and you generally won't be dissatisfied with that. That being said, there are some problems with a rifle scope. A rifle scope, the reticles aren't necessarily set up the same way that reticles are set up in a crossbow scope. Again, we're talking about shooting 40 yards maybe at the most, whereas a rifle scope, that's not even close to the minimum of what a rifle scope is intended to give you reticles for. I mean, you're looking at 100 yards, 200 yards, 900 yards, whatever in a rifle scope. It just doesn't make sense. The other problem with putting a rifle scope on a crossbow is it'll ruin your rifle scope. Okay, there's two different kinds of recoil in the world. A rifle, when you're shooting a rifle, I talked about this in another recent video, but when you shoot a rifle, that bullet goes down the barrel and the rifle kicks back as the bullet is being expelled because of the gases and because of all that compression. With an arrow, with any kind of archery equipment like this crossbow, as that arrow goes down the rail, the shooting rail, the arrow makes its way out and leaves, the string follows it and pushes it, of course. When the limbs release all of their tension and get to the point where they're back to their rested position, that string goes forward a little bit and pushes the crossbow away from you. It's called forward recoil. It's kind of the opposite of what a rifle does. So you're kind of asking for trouble if you put a rifle scope on here. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I still don't understand why you would want to do it, but it's just gonna, you're kind of asking for trouble if you do. What type of target do I want for my crossbow? This is a very good question. It's one I hear an awful lot, and I think there are a couple of different things to take into account. When I first got my crossbow, I bought a cheapo target at Walmart. It was not a bad target. The problem with it is it's not going to last an awful long time. Those styrofoam targets, the thinner targets, a crossbow puts a lot of energy into that arrow. It's got shorter arrows, and you're not going to be able to shoot at that target too many times before that arrow starts going all the way through and passing through that target. So you got to have a good backdrop and all that. It will slow it down, but you'll get to a point where that target is no longer going to be sufficient. I recommend you get a good block target. A block target like the one I bought from Cabela's has lasted me several years. It's showing no sign of being to the point where it's a problem, so I would recommend you use that. It is just great for field tips. Field tips, shooting at that, you can shoot at them over and over and over, and it's still stopping arrows just fine. If you want to practice with your broadheads, you can do that on that target. Can you tell by looking at this target which side I shoot the broadheads at to test it? There's the one side, and there's the other side. Broadheads are going to tear up any target, but in a block target, they're easy to get out and they will still work okay. You can still practice with your broadheads if that's what you want to do. Keeping in mind, too, with a crossbow, you don't have to shoot this thing every day for hours on end. You don't have to run hundreds of arrows through it before you go hunting. You can have this dialed in and be proficient with this with a couple dozen shots, probably, if you feel comfortable and that's where you're at. I shoot once a week. I like to run 3 or 4 arrows through it at different yardages just to make sure, during the season, just to make sure that it's still dead on accurate. And as long as you're doing that, that's usually sufficient in terms of keeping the accuracy up to date with your crossbow. So keep that in mind. Those block targets will last. I know they're expensive, but they'll last quite a while with a crossbow, simply because you don't have to run hundreds of shots through them. Well, I hope you got something out of this video. I hope that answers some of the questions that you might be faced with if you are a new crossbow hunter. And if you're not a new crossbow hunter, if you're just somebody who's been hunting with a crossbow for quite a while and you just thought this was an interesting video to watch, I hope you got something out of it as well. If you have other questions, feel free to either hit me up on the Facebook page, or you can comment here on this YouTube video, and I'll do my best to answer those questions here, maybe do a follow-up video down the road if there's enough questions. But those are some of the most common questions that I've come across, people asking me about crossbows. I hope your crossbow season is a success. Please subscribe to this channel so you can see future videos. And until next time, all hail Bunjie!